As journalists and television hosts, scripts are a lifeline. Each newscast, each story, it all revolves around a script.
But now it's time to go unscripted. That means we're not just going off script, we're throwing out the script altogether.
Each week, we're joined by fellow Farm Journal hosts and editors to peel back the layers on stories we've shared throughout the week.
Unscripted. It's real, it's raw, it's entertaining, and it's your chance to meet the personalities behind the personalities. I'm Tyne Morgan.
And I'm Clinton Griffiths. Welcome to Unscripted.
Welcome, everyone. Well, as you can see, we are missing one key part of this relationship. My trusty sidekick, my partner in crime, Clinton Griffiths, took a little bit of time off, as we talked about in the last podcast. Actually went with his son on a trip, an FFA trip to Ireland, and he was excited. And I'm excited to hear from him on how that trip was. Once in a lifetime opportunity. And so stepping in this week, there was so much equipment news. And so not only is he back by popular demand, but we have so much to talk about with Machinery Pete. Greg Peterson joining us this week. Greg, you're always on the road, but it seems like you've been clocking a lot of miles lately.
Yeah, a lot of miles. Summer of 24. It's true. It's been a fun summer. Always great to get out around the country and talk to folks. We were out in New York filming a humongous construction auction for our TV show a few weeks back, and that was fun. Down in Missouri last weekend, and yeah, you never know where the road may take me.
Well, you're in Missouri, God's country.
Yes.
Glad you got to meet it. Glad you got to make it here. And that's something that we need to talk about because that was a massive sale. I know you've been combing through data and there's a lot of indications there. But Greg, you are on the road so much. People ask me all the time. They say, how do you travel so much? I do not travel near as much as you. Do you ever get burnt out?
Well, you know, the secret there, Tyne, is, I do travel a bit, but nowhere near as much as people think. They ask me how many miles you got on your pickup, and it doesn't compare to salesmen for some of the auction companies I know and some of the dealerships. But the little secret there is sort of by design. I mean, over these 35 years I've been at this, the 1,100, 1,200 auction companies we work with, we get to know them. So now with cell phones and text messaging and stuff, when I post something about an auction in Ontario, sometimes I'm there if it's for the TV show related. Otherwise, it's probably my friends at whatever Shackleton auction up there sending me great pictures and video. So the perception is Machinery Pete was in Ontario, then he was in Louisiana. I'm actually sitting in my basement quite often, like I am right now. So just to be true.
Well, you couldn't do what you do without technology, that's for sure. I mean, the amount of data that you get, you've always relied on technology, but now just in the context that you've made, the friends that you have, that, like you said, share those, like, you have to check this out. And then you're able to spread that out to the masses. So, I know that how many states do you think you've been to this summer alone?
Oh, how many states? Well, that's a good question. I'd say probably a dozen or so. And then up into Canada, I've had 2 trips up into Canada, which were really fun. Ran into some amazing stories up there. I had a couple speaking gigs. But yeah, no, it's just been really fun. We filmed auctions in northwest Minnesota, the Red River Valley. We were out in southern Michigan near Ann Arbor. That was kind of fun because it was 2 brothers, their retirement sale. And they said when Michigan plays Ohio State, the big game, and it's in Ann Arbor, they can hear the 110,000 people cheering. So they know when Michigan scores a touchdown. They don't need to have the game on in the tractor cab. They can hear it. So, it's just fun to meet so many nice people around the country.
Okay, so what's your rule, though? When do you drive and when do you fly? Like, is it like if it's 8 hours I'm driving, no matter what, I'm always driving? What's the Machinery Pete rule of thumb?
Oh, Machinery Pete rule there is always default to drive if you can. Flying, I don't know. I'm trying not to be a grumpy old guy, but just that, even before this, thankfully I missed out on the latest snafus. Some of our Farm Journal colleagues really got stuck in that last one with Delta, and Delta is usually very good, but no, flying, it's just the lack of control there is bothersome. So 8 hours, 10 hours is not too bad of a drive. Paris, Missouri, that one wasn't bad. That was like 6 hours for me to Rochester. So that's like not bad at all. You get out over 8 hours, 10 hours, and then it's, yeah, that gets to be a lot. Although we had one of our Machine Repeat reps was with us in New York, and he drove from South Dakota. So I thought I was hardcore, but he's like, nope, I just want to drive and stop and visit with people. So that was, I think he said, I don't know how many hours that was. That was a lot.
I don't have the patience for that. Well, you mentioned a retirement sale. You mentioned the big sale in Missouri. There's so much good stuff we need to talk about. So let's get to our first segment, Talking Tea. Well, you know what it means to spill the tea. So we're talking tea in this podcast, Unscripted. And so let's revisit a couple of these sales. Okay. Before we get to the one in Missouri, that was massive. And I know you said there were some key indicators there, but before we get to that, this retirement sale that you saw in Michigan, are we seeing more retirement sales right now, Greg? I mean, you look at commodity prices, you look at margins. If I was a farmer and deciding that retirement was in my future, I'd probably be doing it now.
Yeah, I think our data would show there definitely has been an uptick here, spring of 24 carrying through, and we can start to look ahead talking to our auction companies. Yeah, there's a couple things at play there. I think to drill it down to the base level, I mean, it's not as fun, to go through these times like this. And so the average age of the American farmer and the Canadian farmer is what it is. I mean, it's up there. So you see a lot of those folks deciding, yep, hey, it was a good run, time to retire. I would say I am seeing more of a new classification of auction. We've always had like downsizing, for dealers. Hey, we got too much inventory. We're going to have a little inventory reduction sale. Well, now there's actually inventory reduction sales for farmers. There was one down in Mississippi last week, Tunica, Mississippi. And at first blush, I thought it was a dealer auction because there were 5 2-year-old John Deere CP 770 cotton pickers. And they sold from 701,000 down to 612,500. But that was one operation. Now, obviously, there's some huge growing farm operations around, but when times get kind of squeezy like this, I think working with your lenders, you turn to that line on the balance sheet of equipment. And it's like, can we pare some of that down? And so we are seeing more of those auctions pop up. People call them different things, but farm downsizing auctions is definitely on the rise.
Well, when you look at, you mentioned the ag economy, and I did a story earlier this week, looking at 2023, 2024 net farm income. Those 2 years, if USDA forecasts hold true, those 2 years will go down as the largest decline in net farm income ever. And here's the thing, Greg, one economist from University of Missouri says, if there's any change that I could see come out of USDA, it's actually lowering that 2023 net farm income figure, because you think about how much grain right now farmers have in storage. That 2023 crop, they have it sold. It's at a much lower price right now. So you look at it and I called it the ugly truth, because that's what it is. And there is this silent stress among farmers that I've talked to. When you ask them about it, they'll talk about it. But otherwise, they're just trying to keep their head down, nose to the grind. They're worried about this year. They're even more concerned about 2025. And that's the big thing that I'm, one of them said, Tyne, I have these knots in my stomach. Like, I hope it's not as bad as what I think it's going to be, but I can't help but have these knots in my stomach and this angst about what we could see, to close out this year and into 2025. And I actually asked the market analyst as we were recording U.S. Farm Report on Thursday. I asked him, I said, and it was Mark Gold, I said, are we too low on commodity price? I mean, have commodity prices gone too far to the downside? And he goes, Tyne, you tell me when farmers are going to sell. And that's when I can tell you if prices are too low or not, just as long as we have this grain in storage. So you just look at the situation today, Greg, it's not getting any better. This week, we had AGCO sales. They reported sales down 14%. On Thursday, we heard that on Wednesday, actually, Kinsey announced they were cutting 193 jobs out of 108. Over 800, sorry. So not 193 jobs out of 800 in Williamsburg, Iowa. We have that news on top of the John Deere layoffs that we've been hearing about on their production sites. And then last week, salaried employees. We had 500 salaried employees that were cut in Iowa and Illinois. So you hear all of this. It is obvious that demand is taking a beating right now as farmers are pulling back. And of course, the first thing they do is pull back on use or on buying new equipment, buying used equipment, and Greg, I've seen some crazy prices out there. I mean, you can get some of these late model equipment, pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there, Ty, and I would hop in and say, as an old guy, and from a data perspective, I think one thing we need to take note of is, particularly when you compare back to 2 years ago. So those whether it's income drop or I have data that shows used values dropping. We do need to remember that 21 and 2 were the highest ever. So there's that. So my lens goes back 35 years that I've been doing this. So I've actually been focused more not on the drop versus 2 years ago, but on, is the drop comparable to what we saw 10 years ago in end of 13, 14, 15, coming off of high corn and soybean prices. Sales of new equipment were fantastic, basically kind of from late 07 through early 13. And, so there's that, which I can get into that, but then there is the very real human element to it. And the knots in the stomach are real. In fact, one of my friends, Alex Kerr, has a great business, just started an auction company out of Mount Sterling, Illinois. Also sells used equipment. He posted an Instagram video. This was maybe 2 months ago. And he walked around his lot with his camera and he said, folks, I'm feeling the need to mention this. But that tractor, that combine, and that tractor are all off of farms that had suicides. And I don't like this. None of us do. It's not talked about. And he just felt like he needed to share it. And he said, that knot in the stomach, which is real. We're independent people in ag country. I've been sitting in my basement for 35 years. Times are good, times are bad. But as humans, it's okay. And we need to pick up the phone and, whoever it is, family member, a friend, church person, whatever. And Alex, God bless his heart, said, just call me, call our staff. You want to talk? Hey, we get it. We farm too. So that's very, very real. And we feel for people. But I would concur that the general sentiment is that, things aren't going to just turn a merry corner here and be all of a sudden rosy again. It's just, there's no positive signs to that. Now, all that said, I keep track every day on what stuff sells for throughout the US and Canada. So yes, used values have softened, but they're nowhere near what I saw the drop in 2014 and 15, not even close. And it shocks people when I say that. And frankly, it surprises me, but there's a couple structural differences now. This is the hard part because all of us sees what's right in front of our gosh darn face. Oh, this happened today. You got to stop. You got to pull back and you got to think of what was different 10 years ago. So on the dealer front, farm equipment dealers, there were a lot more dealers. Back then there were many dealers that had 2 to 5 stores. And of course, we know what's happened over the last decade. They just got gobbled up. And now you have these dealers that are, 25 to 80 stores. And they're just different. They're capitalized different. Some of them are funded, different funding sources. They're just different. They roll different. In the old days, when the ag market changed, and if you had 4 dealerships, 4 locations, and you had, we got too many combines, we got too many 4-wheel drive tractors, those dealers couldn't push them out to auction and take the hits on the loss to clear the inventory. If they did, they'd have been out of business. They had a little bit of the hold and hope strategy. And that's not an effective strategy. If you want to move new equipment, you got to make sure that used stuff is moving and not piling up. So now the big increase that we're seeing, in fact, I think I just did a piece for Ag Day on this 2 weeks ago, but I actually looked at the number of 1 to 2 year old pieces of farm equipment sold at auction the first 6 months of 2024, 74% higher than last year, 351% higher than 3 years ago, right when the supply chain mess was at its worst in 21. So, but I also went back 10 years to 2014 and 15. And again, we're like 70 to 100% more 1 to 2 year old items hitting the auction block. So what is that? That's these fewer larger mega dealerships being very kind of freaked out and very aggressive. Like we gotta push this stuff out.
Mm.
Well, I was in Paris, Missouri last week that had the most late model equipment I've ever seen in almost 35 years. That had equipment from 15 dealerships, and they weren't all from around Paris, Missouri. Wheeler Auctions and Real Estate, a fantastic company. They market very well.
Mm.
So again, that's one piece that's different. The other piece that's different versus 10 years ago is the sea change we've had with online auctions. So your potential buyer is not like it was 10 years ago when if you had a sale down by you in Missouri, yeah, maybe we had some Kansas, we had some few Nebraska people. Well, now, click the button. Those buyers last Saturday were from Pennsylvania, Ontario, Texas, everywhere. So those things help the auction pricing actually be stronger than it was 10 years ago. And again, that surprises people. But now that all that said, I mean, we're going to see a lot of auctions the rest of 24. So I'll be reporting daily, and if and when it gets down that low or lower, I'll be shouting it.
Well, and that was my next question, because last week we did have Corey Reed of John Deere in the studios here in Lenexa for an exclusive one-on-one interview. A lot of people asked Greg, they were like, well, did they tell you what to ask? Did you have to submit questions in advance? No. And Corey said, you can ask me anything. Now, Greg, was he able to answer everything? No, they're getting ready for third quarter earnings. And so there were certain questions that I asked, like, are you cutting the price of equipment? Some specific questions like that he didn't answer point blank. The other one that he couldn't answer point blank because of this earnings period is he more concerned about 2025? I mean, you look at the data today, and he admitted, Greg, that the first half of the year was a little bit better than what you would expect. I mean, the demand was still there, but now as we see like the latest Association of Equipment Manufacturers come out, and I know this is for used equipment, but you see combines down, I think 31%, all farm tractors down 16%. I mean, you look at these numbers, we're seeing a bigger decline now than we kind of saw the first half of the year. And I mean, it kind of goes along with producers. Their nerves are getting higher. They're cutting back even more. And so I asked Corey, do you think next year you'll see an even, 2025, will it be worse than 2024? And is that why, you're making some of these cuts now? And he would not talk about 2025, but he did say, we are really, really good at projecting the long term. We're not really good at looking at the short term. Because I asked him things like, did you make these cuts soon enough? Are these proactive, or are these reactive? Things like that. But I mean, I know you don't like to get your crystal ball out and say what's going to happen, because that can make a fool out of everyone. And you just like to report the data. But it just seems like we could see even more headwinds to close out 2024. So it'll be interesting to see what your auction data reveals.
Yeah, I would concur there with the deteriorating market conditions second quarter of 24. To me, the auction pricing kind of once we hit June 1st is when I started to see a little, more significant change there, I would say. So, and as I look back compared to auction prices January, February, early March, yeah, they're definitely softer now. It's, and obviously on the manufacturer level, I mean, very, very difficult conversations, and we feel for the communities with those folks laid off. And of course, a lot of farm families there have employees, and it's nothing easy about that at all. I think to me, Tyne, it drives me back to when I first started going out to auctions. I was a 23-year-old kid back in 1989. And I remember all along this path, 3.5 decades, there were points there where you'd be standing at an auction and you'd watch a tractor, a combine, or planter. So maybe 25 years ago, you'd say, oh my gosh, that tractor sold for $200,000 at auction, 2-year-old tractor. How can that be? And you'd turn and talk to farmers, whether it's Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, wherever. And we'd be like, it can't go any higher. It just can't go any higher. So to me, the big underlying issue is just the cost of new right now. Yeah. Now, there's obviously a lot of issues to it. But before we hopped on the call, I just read a story from On the automobile side, I think it's Stellantis, the owner of Ram and Jeep, announced offering to lay off or buyouts for a lot of their white collared employees. And I think it was their CEO just got real in the interview, and he just said, well, we're trying to manufacture a price point vehicle that's a good price point for people. And it's hard to do that. Now, when we were down in Houston at the Commodity Classic this year, and of course, Deere and Case IH, all that, releasing tremendous products that help farmers with their productivity and the lack of labor. They're all tremendous products with investments, years in the making. But the fact is, I shot a video of that John Deere, whatever, that X9 830 or whatever it was, 84,000 pounds, the highest horse tractor Deere ever made. We walked through all the pluses of it and stuff. And what people asked me after that was, well, what's it cost? And it's about $1.3 million. Now, when the merry-go-round is humming around and the money's flowing in ag, that's one thing. That's even difficult there. But when the merry-go-round is slowing down or stopping, income-wise for farmers, 1.3 million or 800,000, that's just tough. So all those years at auctions when we'd say, can it go higher? Can it go higher? Can the price of a new tractor again, it's, cost of everything went up. So it's not an easy thing for a manufacturer, but it's just, it feels like we maybe found the end of the rainbow cost wise. I mean, it just, and again, the Commodity Classic was early in March. And I'm telling you that I didn't really start to see our data and the chatter really turn until like late May, early June. So, but even back then, people were like, how many people are there? They're going to buy a $1.3 million tractor.
Right.
And then who's going to buy when it's 2 years old, what's it going to be worth? And really, that's why people right now with our auction data, like you could look at a John Deere X9 1100 combine, came out a couple years ago, and whatever they, sold for news, $800,000 or something. The fact is right now, the average auction price is $482,456. They're a couple years old. And that's statistically speaking, it's actually in line with the price drop we've seen over the last 2.5 decades. I compare the average auction price to the average dealer ad price. But when you start off at 800,000 new, and then you see one sell at auction. There were two last Saturday in Missouri, one for 428 and one for 410. Farmers see that and go, "Oh my God, that's really low."
But that's a steal.
The thing, well, right, that's what you're talking about. But the thing I guess I've come to appreciate about the auction market all these years, Tyne, is it's just brutally honest. And so the last 2-3 years, I sounded like a broken record. Hey, record price. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And now it's not that. Now it's the other. And, it just is what it is.
Greg, our friend Ben Ritchie in Iowa, he had emailed me over the weekend. And one of my favorite quotes that he had sent was, he said, they're now trying to sell Navigators and Escalades in an Escape and Equinox world. And so, I mean, you look at the cost of anything, though. I mean, I think about, I don't know how many times I've said to my husband, I almost said new husband.
Oh, James. It's all good. I'm here to report, folks. It's all good. Tyne and James are solid. They're fantastic.
On a side note, I said, James, at first I said, if anything ever happens to you, I'm never getting remarried. Did I tell you this? That's what I had told them.
I've not heard this.
Yeah. So I said, this was a few years ago. I said, if anything ever happens to you, I'm not getting remarried. Like, it's not worth it. And then I had to take the trash out, and we have a really long driveway, and I don't have a truck. And I said, screw it. I'm getting remarried. I can't do this stuff alone. Anyway. So,
screw it.
Really
I'm getting remarried. Okay. That's awesome.
I just, anyway, so that quote from Ben, though, you think about it. Even with trucks, I've said to James, like, $100,000 for a pickup or $100,000 for an SUV. My gosh, like, how much higher can this go? And the next year, guess what? They get higher. You look at, and I know that is minute compared to what we're talking about with equipment here, but you look at everything, and it has just gotten so expensive. So now when we do see some of these auction prices come in, or you do see some of these used models come in and they are much cheaper, I mean, it feels like a deal. It feels like a steal just because we were starting at such high prices. But I mean, I remember at Commodity Classic, and I actually asked Corey that question. I said, what changed? Because I feel like at Commodity Classic, when we saw the highest horsepower tractor ever that Deere introduced, there was so much excitement, so much momentum. You didn't feel this angst and this worry, and it really wasn't something that we were talking about. And then what? That was that February, late February. So we're talking
Yeah,
March, April, May,
right.
June, now July. I mean, it's changed
Hmm.
dramatically. And so, my question for you though, Greg, is we've got corn prices right now under $4, new crop corn under $4. We've been here before. We've
Yep.
had sub $4 corn before, but I don't remember. And it's not just Deere. I mean, I talked about Kinsey. We look at
Hmm.
AGCO and looking at drop sales. So what makes this so different when we've been there before? And is it just the price of equipment right now, Greg?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to what I brought up earlier, is that I think it's part of the social media age we live in. I mean, cell phones are great. Obviously, our company, Machinery Pete, we appreciate people being on your phone and our website, but that's just how we live. And I think we're actually in this wide human experiment that we're all a piece of, living on our phones, living on social media. And we don't realize we're in the middle of this. We're in the first baby steps of this experiment. Is this good for us as people? And I think more of the people I talk to, again, not to be a grumpy old guy, but more people are going, you know what? That stuff, it's just this constantness of the chatter and the bickering and the everything. And we're in the news media business. Even that, it's like, the news headlines, the constantness of it is wearing us down. And I think when conditions change like this, you said, we've seen it before. The folks I like to talk to in this market are the 75 to 85-year-old farmers
Mm.
who have a wider perspective. If you lived through the 80s, coming off of the 70s, when the 70s were, from 1973 on, that was basically like a rocket ship. And then we saw the opposite. But we forget that because all we can think about is last month, or that would be like even last week. So, one of the things, if I had more help, what I would do and been wanting to do, and I'm not sure how much you guys have done with this, but is just getting people in voice. What was it like? People freak out now, 8% interest. Well, what the hell was it like to pay 20% interest in
Okay.
1980 on a tractor?
Yep.
Now, I sort of am fearful for the young folks in ag who don't maybe have that grandma or grandpa to be in their ear, like, hey, John, hey, Susie, just, take this with a grain of salt, because things can get worse. And, now I would say too that I'm really intrigued by changing markets time, just situationally, because actually, I don't know if it was Clinton, I think for Farm Journal had a recent issue, or maybe it was Top Producer, and they asked me, Greg, can you give us a column where you just give some tips for like young people poised to take over their farm operation in the next 5-10 years? And I thought, well, that's a really good topic. And I thought about it. I'm a numbers guy. One of the things tracking numbers and trends for 3.5 decades, Tyne, is that, I think trying to make yourself think long term and pull out of the instancy of the emotion, and realizing that there's actually tremendous opportunity when things get challenging. Now, I'm in the farm equipment business right now, and everyone's pulling back and cutting. We understand why.
Right.
Personally, I would lean the other way, and I'd put my foot to the pedal and just message out, whatever your products are, when everyone else is pulling back, just do the opposite. And, obviously it's no fun when corn and beans are low, but I wrote a column for Farm Journal magazine, December of 2015. And like I said, the drop in used values in 2014 and 15 year over year, large late model stuff was 20 to 25% for 2 years in a row. And right at the end of 15, our data started to show that it was leveling off. So for farmers who didn't have many available dollars, and no one likes to catch the falling knife, oh, prices are going down, they're going down. I came out and it was very uncomfortable for me because you know me, you know how I don't. You're always asking me, hey, Greg, what do you think? And I'm like, hey, I haltingly go into that space. But in December of 15, I said, talking to the farm audience, I'm like, folks, you'll never, ever in your life have a better opportunity to be an aggressive buyer of used equipment than right freaking now. Because dealers, there was still excess used, but the value trends weren't dropping, they were holding. Now, if you go back now, but of course, no one was aggressive. Everyone was pulling back. Now, if you would have bought a 2-year-old combine or tractor or planter in 2014, 15, 16, and you look at what they sold for the last 10 years, it's easy to look back now and say, oh, well, if I would have known. But that's what I'm talking about, the theory of opposites. When everyone is pulling back, that signals you to be aggressive, and vice versa. When everyone is full bore, hey, this is a one-way train to Moneytown, I'm sprinting the other direction. Like, get me off of that train, because that's gonna be a train wreck.
Well, I also like to ask you, what is the best deal that you're seeing? And so I know you have a lot of trends that you've been watching lately, a lot of auctions. So let's move on to our next segment, which is What the Sigma. Okay, before we get into What the Sigma, I just want to, you've said that you're old several times. You're not old, you're just experienced. And you've also said, I don't mean to be the old grumpy guy. Well, it reminded me on the show this weekend, Andrew McCrae has a story. There's actually a town in Iowa, Reedland, Iowa, where
Yes,
they
I've been there.
You have? They celebrate being grumpy. Did you see the old grump around town?
I was there, I think in 16, there was an auction. A guy had a John Deere 4020 71 model, and it only had like 3,700 hours on it. And it was funny, I think it sold for like 37.5. But the crowd, it was an old time crowd. It was huge. And it got down to 2 guys bidding. One was way over to my left. I could see him. And one was way over on my right. There was a guy on a phone, and he was on I think it was his dad was on his phone with his son from Germany, who grew up around Reedland. Of course, a lot of John Deere employees worked for John Deere and farmed there outside of Waterloo. And the guy to my left got it. And I talked to him afterwards. But yeah, Reedland, Iowa is a great community. Shout out to those folks. But I did not see Mr. Grumpy there.
Okay, well, I got to get to that in a second. But can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that you had no idea I was going to bring up Reedland, and your brain just went to 2016. You remember what it sold for, exactly what the model was, the story behind who was, I mean, seriously, Greg, how does it work that way? So they say some people have photographic memories. I mean, I don't know if it's you seeing it and then it is ingrained in your brain, but what do you call, I mean, are you a genius? Like, do we just need to put this on the record right now? Are you a genius?
Can we splice that, what you just said, and if I can use little pieces of that? The answer is no, I'm not a genius. When, thinking about that day, I can see the cloud pattern in the sky in my head. Because, I was shooting video, so I'd post a YouTube video of it. But those little things that people remember, quite often over the years when I'm talking to people, and they will say, I remember the day my dad or my grandpa came home with the new Oliver or whatever,
right.
2150.
Right.
And they remember what day of the week it was. And they remember the weather on that. Oh, it was cold, windy that morning. And they know it was a Thursday. Now, I don't know why, as humans, I think, Tyne, the older I get, I realized I wish I would have studied psychology in college instead of numbers, accounting, because it is just fascinating. And these human emotions we have, they actually, they affect the decisions we make on obviously Farm Journal, you guys do an awesome job advising people to get ahead of it, with succession planning. And, the reasons we make these decisions, we don't realize the effect our emotions have on us. Now, as ag economy turns, that gets back to what my friend Alex, and you identified all the knots in the stomach. again, it's emotion, and that's real. We're humans. We're wired to be, even up here in Minnesota, we consider ourselves probably, stoic Scandinavians, but we've got knots. Everyone's got knots. That's life. But again, trying to not let emotions take us down bad paths, and for business decisions, try not to let circumstances dictate, selling when you shouldn't sell, or, again, I think just that theory of opposites. But
Greg, I'm not letting you get off the hook, because I know that those
Okay.
like you say, people remember what day of the week or whatever. But for some of them, it was a life-changing event. For some of them, it was very personal. I guess
Yeah.
every single auction you go to is personal, because you remember something from every single auction. Again, for the record, I did not let Greg know I was going to talk about Reedland, Iowa, and he immediately the Rolodex in his brain popped open, and Reedland popped up.
Well, Tyne, I might be predisposed to be thinking along these lines this particular week, because it was actually August, I think, 6th of 2009 is the first YouTube video I posted. And so it's 15 years ago this month. So I have so many fond memories about, and that was before I had partnered my machine repeat business with Farm Journal Media.
Yep.
That was 5 years before that. So I was still just the guy in my basement, and my wife Jackie was starting to get on my case, like, you're not sleeping much. You're sleeping like 4 hours a night. And I know you love what you're doing down there in the basement, but you're going to drop. But what was fun was that back then I could sort of see it was the start of social media in ag. So Facebook was there starting to go, and YouTube was starting to go. And at that point, I had 20 years in building our machine repeat business. And number one job for me was always being a dad. So our two girls, Megan and Josie, were off to college. Megan was in college, Josie was on her way. And here comes this YouTube thing. And I'm like, I'm uncomfortable with new technology, but if I'm reading this right, I think I can get myself. Now, there weren't cell phones that shot video then. I had to go buy a flip cam at Target, cost $99. And I'm like, I got this flip cam and I can go anywhere and post it. And then, so I started doing that. I'd go to Reedland, Iowa, or one of the first auctions I went to. Oh, now this was another. See, if I was a genius, I'd remember every exact town I was at. But
listen, you remember it's almost every one of them. I cannot believe.
One of the things that got me pointed on that this would have been 16 years ago last month, July of 2008. I went to an auction, and it was in Iowa. It was north of Ames. I want to say Remsen, but I don't think that's right. But I'd been doing blogging on our Machine Repeat website then, but you couldn't post any pictures. So I was just black and white, just text. And I wrote about this sale. Hey, I'm going to be at this sale, and that's really bothering me. It might have been Remsen, but anyway, I'm like, I'm going to be at this sale tomorrow. And I show up at the sale. Again, I've been sitting in my basement at that point for 19 years. And I show up at the sale, and this guy comes right up to me, a white-haired guy, and he goes, Machine Repeat, I got to talk to you. I thought he was mad. And I'm like, hey, how you doing, sir? And he goes, I read your stuff every day on your blog. And his name was Cliff Durward. He was from Thompson, Illinois. So he drove.
Remember his name?
Well, I remember Cliff, because it's people. And I think that's, I mean, agriculture is personal. And that's the piece I like most about this. It's technology, it's all this stuff, but you get right down to it. It's
the people.
It's people. It's a people business. So Cliff came up and he said, Machine Repeat, you wrote about that John Deere 7830 with 1,200 hours. What do you think it's going to sell for? And I did what I tell you. I'm like, Cliff, I don't like to predict.
I know. He asked you to get out that crystal ball. You like to keep stashed very, very far away.
I did my Norwegian qualifier. I don't like to predict. But then I said, Cliff, our data would say it's going to go from like 85 to 90,000. And he pointed his finger. He was smiling when I did it, but he pointed his finger in my chest. He goes, you're wrong. It's going to go for 93. And he was right. That's like just what it sold for.
How did he know?
Well, farmers are very smart.
Yeah.
And he was following our stuff. And there again, sometimes there's an up vibe. Now that was that was summer of '08. So corn and
Yep.
beans had shot up November of '07. So things were
Yeah,
on the
you said
up.
2007 to 2013, so we're right at the
Yep.
front edge of that.
And now we're going the other way.
Yeah.
But Cliff was plugged in. And what I remember about that was, you know, it shocked me that this older farmer was like, I read your stuff every day. And I thought, wow, that's pretty, I'm just totally flattered and honored. He also told me Thompson, Illinois was the watermelon capital of Illinois, which I didn't know. So I enjoyed talking to people. But I remember driving home that day thinking, I gotta figure out, the columns I write are cool, and the TVs. I wasn't doing our own show then. I was a piece of a different show, machinery
Right.
show. But I got to figure out a way to give people more. And so the next
You
year in
did.
'09, that's when YouTube, and I think we're pushing
Mm.
2,300 videos. So when I was out in New York 3 weeks ago, that was a construction sale, but still people are coming up, and there was a family with little kids and like, we watch your show every Saturday, Pete. And I mean, it's such an honor to visit with people like that and hopefully help them out with, their questions or things they're working on.
But you started because the girls went off to college. You were dad. That was your number one job all those years.
Yep,
And because
yep.
the girls went off to college, you needed to fill a void. So can we call YouTube your midlife crisis?
You'd have to ask Jackie, my wife, that.
I'll ask Jackie.
That actually is a very deep psychological insight, Tyne. You are very wise, and I guess I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't do any
I
of
know
that.
you got into YouTube and you were, I mean, you weren't addicted. You were dedicated. There's a difference.
Well, I remember having the distinct feeling that this is open road. This is just open. And I had 20 years talking to people about auctions and prices and stories. So when I started to get the feedback, when I started to venture out again, people were like, hey, that's Machinery Pete. I got a question for you. It was like, oh man, we got to open the doors. We got to make this thing wider. So I
You
didn't
had
know
great
anything.
insight.
I didn't know
Great, not insight, but great foresight to know that was.
Well,
that
what
was
I
coming.
need at this point, what I need to say back is just a tremendous thank you to all the people listening to this that have followed our stuff for all these years. Because I tell people that I felt like I was being pulled along, and it's just been really fun.
But a post a day, right? I mean, you've been dedicated. A post a day.
Well, yeah, that would be the psychological piece, if a deep study of Machinery Pete, because I have not missed one day since then of posting on social media.
I don't know how you do.
And that's vacations, weddings, holidays.
I know it's what I'm saying. I don't know how. I mean, and I don't think people understand. It's Greg. It is Machinery Pete. It's not like he has the social media team behind him. It is the Machinery Pete. If there is a post, someone's not writing that for him. That is Greg. Okay, we've got a couple more things to get to before we run out of time. But what the Sigma? By the way, this all started with me talking about the grumpy old guy. And what I was going to tell you is in Greenland, they actually celebrate the old grump, and the person that gets the grumpy award each year is actually one that volunteers most and stuff. And so it's actually a positive connotation to be the old grump in the town. That's American Countryside this weekend on the show. Okay, now
I'm not going to let you go. I have to interject this. I posted on social media last year at one point. I love the movie Grumpy Old Men.
You do?
Because it was filmed in Wabasha, Minnesota, which is 40 minutes from where I live. And of course, that was Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. And Jack Lemmon's father was Burgess Meredith. And my sister actually purchased some property outside of Stillwater, Minnesota, where they shot a scene in Grumpy Old Men 2 when Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau sit on the bench. And I think Walter comes up and says, we're talking about downtimes in ag. So they were two old crusty old guys from rural Minnesota. And they're like, tough day. Yep. Here's a beer.
Yeah.
But now, folks, that's a little example about, when just talk about it.
Yeah.
Call your buddy, have a beer, whatever. So that's to get off tangent. I had to work that in.
All right. So let's just talk about it. What the Sigma? Okay. What is the craziest? Like you said, you've been to a couple auction prices. Let's specifically talk about that Paris auction because that one was huge. And you said you've never seen this much late model equipment. So what was your the Sigma moment of that auction?
Well, ironically, it was a 50-plus-year-old tractor. So we were filming for our TV show. So obviously we captured a lot of late model stuff. And again, that X9 1100, 800 or 712 engine hours goes for $428K. So I think that was the highest price item at the sale. Tons of combines, tons of tractors. But one of the items we did film was, I think, a 1971 International 1456, so a classic muscle tractor. And the thing that was cool about it, Tyne, it brought 37.5, which is a very strong price. And so that was, there were 4,000 pieces that sold that day. So they sold it and boom, the auction truck takes off. And afterwards, I was standing by it and a young kid, 14 years old, came up and wanted to talk about it and said, Machinery Pete, is that the all-time record high price on a 1456? And we had like a 10-minute conversation. And there was an older gentleman had introduced me to him and said, Greg, this young man wants to talk. And I thought it was so cool that a young guy on the farm there is interested in a 1970s tractor. So that's what I love about auctions. And again, it's people. So we can talk about the fact that a X9 1100, right now is selling for 67.9% at auction of the average dealer ad price. That's a fact. It's a data point. Machinery Pete column about that. But right next to it is a 52-year-old 1456 tractor that was lighting up some 14-year-old kid. And I'd rather write and talk about the kid than the combine.
Where was he from? Was he from Missouri?
He was a Missourian, yes. He was a good kid. I want to say it was like Trent. Names are my absolute bugaboo. But he was he was a quiet kid, but he had a smile on his face, and he was, he was just into that tractor. And that was as I drove 6 hours home, I would think about, honestly, that tractor and then just all the people at the auction.
Yeah.
That
I saw so many people there. I mean, I had a bit of FOMO going on because
we should have had you at the sale. Would have, again, our show ratings would have just skyrocketed. Like the last time we had you out, I dragged you over. Where was that sale? That was in Indiana. Yeah.
When I lived in Indiana, outside of Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
That was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a different kind of just Machinery PTV. It's a different type of show. So those are always fun. So when you look at that was the craziest price that I guess that one had the best story because of that young kid. And did you tell him that at some point you'll be looking for a Machinery Pete 2.0 version, of yourself? Is he interested? Did you put that bug in his ear?
Yes. Oh, hey, we're looking for young people that want to help our business forward. Actually, I've been consulting with people. It was funny at that auction. I ran into the farmer Grace.
Yeah.
And Gavin.
Yes.
So,
Gavin Spore.
I went up and we were just going to film a John Deere 7R 210 cell for the TV show, and it sold fairly well. But there was Grace and Gavin, so I went up to talk, and we did a little selfie, and then I was asking them, I'm like, "Are you guys on TikTok?" That's where I need help with young people. Is I've been hesitant to start on TikTok because I don't want to walk out there and put content out that doesn't fit the vibe. So I'm picking the brains of young people.
Is it that, or you don't want China spying on you?
I'm
just kidding. China gets mad at me when I bring that up.
China, you know what? That's an interesting topic. Obviously, it's pretty loaded. You get me pointed in the right direction. This is
we're not going to get into that one this time because there's all types of there's a whole segment we can have privacy and all of those topics. Anyway, so what'd they say?
What did who say
about TikTok?
Oh, Gavin was great. He said, Greg, I think if you about 12 to 15 seconds and you just do a little post like, hey, this sold today, a little clip. And he's like, I think that'll fit. And I was like, oh, hey, I thank you, Gavin, for giving me that feedback. Cause I like to sit and watch little TikTok videos that make me laugh at the end of the day, but
I know
I just don't want to put out content that people go, oh, that doesn't fit. So anyway, I'm working on it. If you haven't,
I'm not even 40 years old and I have that same concern. I'm like, I don't know I may be too old for this. Like, I don't think that I fit the vibe, but I don't know. We're going to try some stuff on Crop Tour. I asked them to explore the latest dance trends. And I'm going to get Chip Flory to do that. He doesn't know that yet. Yeah.
Chip Flory dancing. You tag Machinery Pete. We will share that.
Listen,
with the world.
think even without alcohol, he's a good dancer, just so you know. Okay. Okay.
Man.
My What the Sigma. I went down we have a feature this weekend on the show, our Mavericks feature, where we're out like just featuring and profiling these farmers that are doing crazy and unique things. Okay. And we went down last week and visited a guy named Travis Center. He's in Northeast Arkansas, that center with an S. Greg, he's wired differently in the best way. Like, he is so kind, so soft spoken, so sweet. But the second you start talking to him, he's brilliant. And he has figured out a way to utilize Chat GPT on the farm. In fact, last year, there was some things that he wanted to know. He wanted to compile like some of his yield data with weather data so he could get back and really be very calculated and know, okay, and this year, this is when, based on previous years and historical data, this is when the crop's going to pollinate this year. This is what the weather could be like if the crop pollinated at this time. So he created his own version of Chat GPT because at the time you couldn't upload documents. So he did that. He uses virtual reality. Like, he can go in a field, and he said, Greg, the thing he likes about virtual reality, the things that, doing some of that, the things he likes about Chat GPT is it doesn't judge you. It doesn't judge your question. So he said, when you go to the doctor or you go to someone and you have a question, they may judge you. And he goes, sometimes maybe I should know the answer. Maybe I shouldn't. But I asked some of these services, I asked my question, like, for example, sees a weed in the field or sees an insect in the field. What is that? You can ask that question and they're not going to judge you. And if you don't like that answer, you can just say, are you sure about that? And they'll give you another answer. So, we think about Chat GPT. We even think about it in how we're going to use that some ways in what we do, but
Yep.
it's just for a farmer to be able to use that. And he just thinks so differently. And actually, he said this year he's been suggesting this to John Deere because I think he's in a focus group. He's been suggesting this for a while, but he suggested that in their app, in the John Deere app, he wanted to know, like, when you enter a field, based on all of the data, what is his estimated time to finish that field? And so, he goes, could I live without it? Yeah. But it would be nice to have because, for example, they live in some areas that are pretty populated. He goes, I don't want to get done with a field when they're letting out of school or, something like that that's going to slow us down. And he goes, and what makes it fun is just similar to your GPS or Waze or whatever you use. It gives you that estimated finish time and you try to beat it. Anyway, and that was a suggestion that came from him. And so, he thinks about things so differently, was the kindest person. And actually, we're going to get into that a little bit because we'll get into our last segment now, which is my fantastic life. So, Greg, huge shout out to Travis because I last minute we found out about this trip. And unlike you, if it is 7 hours, I'm going to fly. Okay. I'm going to try to fly at least. Well, that's when the meltdown with all of the airlines had happened. And I needed to be back in the studio Thursday. So I'm like, all right, screw it. I'm just going to have to drive. So I rented a car. Anyway, got home and I was telling James, I'm like, okay, I've got to pack my bags. I've got to leave first thing tomorrow morning. And I said, I'll probably stay in Memphis. And Kimbrel, the youngest, she said, Mom, did you say Memphis? I said, yeah. She goes, I've always wanted to go to Memphis. I said, really? I said, well, I'm actually going to go visit a farmer in Arkansas. She goes, are you serious? I've always wanted to go to Arkansas too. And I said, well, pack your bags. Let's go. So her first work trip with me solo ever, she packed her bags, went with me. And apparently she thought that she was going to be, I guess maybe she thought she forgot Elvis passed away because that's the first thing. She thought that she was going to get to see Elvis in Memphis. And then she thought she was going to meet Dolly Parton. And I'm like, doesn't work that way. And we're at the opposite end of the state. Long story short, she went with me. And Travis, and then his dad, Travis Sr., Greg, they were the kindest to her. They were the kindest people. She actually got in the car with Travis because he used to be a race car driver. Like for 20 years, he drove and raced and drove and built race cars. And he said, actually, being a race car driver made him a better farmer because in racing, data is even more important. And so he got really in tune with data and how he can use it differently. So anyway, took her to see his race cars. And then when she was on the farm in the South, if you've ever read Chris Bennett's piece on finding marbles, it's a big thing in the South that apparently they used to play marbles all the time, of course.
Oh, yeah. I remember playing marbles in elementary school, even up in Minnesota.
Well, now that when they tear down some of these houses on some of these properties, then you'll find these marbles. Well, Kimbrel, she got out of the vehicle with me when I was doing the interview, and the first thing she found was a marble. Found it, loved it, and then Travis sent her a huge bag of marbles from his dad and him, and I mean that package was heavy, but he sent it, and a big shout out to Travis because Greg, I mean, agriculture is a big family. It always is, no matter where I
Yeah.
go. I mean, everyone treats you with kindness, but just the amount of grace that they showed. You know, she's young. She was going to get bored sitting there for a while. We had a couple of rain delays. Good for them. They've got a big crop. They got more rain.
Yep.
But anyway, I had a couple of rain delays, and they were so kind and so generous. So I just want to say a huge thank you to the centers because you made Kimbrel's first trip. I mean, she's 8. First ever work trip she's got to go on with me. And she, you know, I think now she's going to want to go on every single one. So just memories. That's what I thought about. She's
Yes.
going to have good memories of Memphis.
Now I have a question, Tyne. So you guys, you and James have 2 great daughters there, and Jackie and I had 2 daughters. Now they used to be the age of your 2, but now they're 33 and almost 31. So when little Kimbrel packed her suitcase there, like describe the suitcase to me, because I'm trying to remember our 2 little girls' suitcases from 3 decades ago.
Well, it's just a small. She has a small little suitcase that she packed with, you know, in a typical 8-year-old fashion. She packed what she thought was necessary, which didn't include underwear or anything like that. So I had to go back through. All right, Kimbrel. All right, no toothbrush either. I'm like, Kimbrel, we need the necessities. She was packing important stuff, like different stuffed animals to take, and you know, stuff like
right.
that.
I remember those days. Yes.
And her iPad and all of that. But yeah, she had a blast.
There were no iPads 30 years ago.
I know. So that's what's changed. But believe me, it makes for a better ride. I don't even know. Like at one point, she put her iPad down. I mean, because it's 7 hours for us to get there.
Yeah.
And at one point, she was getting car sick, so she put her iPad down. And I talk a lot, so I understand. But she was nonstop, and Greg, she was hilarious, and so it was fun. Good.
She
Memories.
will remember that trip for the rest of her life, and you certainly will too.
Yeah.
And someday you will tell her kids about that. And that's and going to small town America to do the work you do or the work I do is small town in Arkansas, small town in Minnesota. People they're great people, and they're appreciative of the work you guys do, and telling their story. So yeah, what an honor it is to be able to go out and see folks like those you visited last week.
Yeah, it was awesome. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Travis and his family. Okay, any life updates for you? Have you seen the grandbabies lately?
Well, our grandson Julian turns 1 this week, so we're excited to see him soon. And fortunately, our daughter, she's been home a number of times, and we've been out. They live out in Southern Ohio, so yeah, he's doing great. And this is one area where technology is wonderful. Time.
Yes.
We get little video clips and updates.
Yes.
And we did have a trip to Norway last month. We took the family, both our daughters and their husbands, and little Julian and my wife.
Seriously, I didn't know that. You took them all.
The most fun on the trip, Tyne, it was interesting. My wife Jackie's mom, Lois, her family, generations ago came from central Norway, a little town of Gol, Gol. So we went to Oslo for 2-3 days, had a great. Oslo's amazing, by the way. And then we took the train. These European countries have amazing transportation.
Yeah.
We're cowboy culture here in the U.S. We're all, give me my pickup and I'm off. Over there, they've invested 100 years ago. They built this train that went through the mountains. I don't know how they did it, but it zooms across to Bergen on the coast. And we hopped off in Gol, and we contacted the people that own her family's former farmstead.
What?
And so we went up the hills of Gol, beautiful Gol, Norway, and we spent 3 hours with this family, and they had all the documents going back to the 1600s.
Oh my gosh.
So my takeaway from that was, to see my mother-in-law Lois's, the excitement. I mean, she had a walker, but she was zooming up these gravel paths and stuff to see these little, they're kind of like huts, but that would have been where her great grandpa or grandma was living, and the little one-room schoolhouse down in the valley. And you just stand there, and just to be on the physical ground. And this farm people get this. Roots are important, whether that's, people proud of their 100-year farms here in the U.S. But if you ever have a chance, do some of this genealogy stuff and just go back, whatever the old country is, Denmark, Germany,
Yep.
Wherever. put your feet there and just, I can't really tell you. It's very, very, very powerful. So to do that with mom was fantastic.
Oh my gosh. So are both of your ancestors from Norway?
My mom's side is pretty much all Norwegian. My dad has a lot of Danish in him. So Scandinavia mostly. And my wife, her mom was from Norway, 100% Norwegian. Her dad's family is German. And we tried to convince her dad, Ron, my father-in-law, to go with us. But Ron does not like to travel. The uncontrolled aspects of travel and airplanes. I tried my best, Machinery Pete, and I couldn't convince him, but we sent him lots of pictures, and we just had a wonderful time. And to be able
Jackie's
to hang,
mom still went.
she went. Lois is a warrior. I mean, my wife, my brother and I actually have a shared philosophy. A little marriage advice for you from Machinery Pete. How about this? My theory of opposites actually carries over into relationships. Now, if you have some insight, Tyne, you know that I'm not the most organized guy. I'm just not. But I'm okay with it. I kind of know where everything is in my mess, and I'm cool with it. I can be very efficient. My wife, Jackie, is to roll that way, she would freak out. She couldn't do it. She is super, super organized. So we match. We kind of make each other like one fit. And anyway, my brother has the same philosophy. We've had wonderful luck. We don't plan to remarry either. So no, it's we fill gaps. As I think that was the line of it's from the movie Rocky. When Rocky was talking about Adrian, and he goes, "We fill gaps." And it's like, yo, Adrian, that is 100% correct. Filling gaps. That's what it's all about.
But so Jackie's the organized one. It doesn't create any conflict ever?
No, because she knows me, and she. Well, the one thing I would say is, as I get older, actually, like when I joined Farm Journal, I used to tease our colleague Margie Eckelkamp about this. She would talk about the I forget what those things are called when you do the personality trait thing, and you're trying to identify, I'm a maximizer, I'm a whatever. I don't even know the categories. The only interest I would ever have in taking a test like that is to see what areas I suck in. What are you not good at, Machinery Pete? Well, that would be, I'm a procrastinator. Okay, now as I get older, if you realize your weak points, there's two ways you can go there. You can go, screw it, that's the way I am. Or you can go, you know what? I could be better there. And that is what I try to take that road. It's kind of fun to get uncomfortable and go, yeah, I can see where Jackie does it this way. And that's a good way. That's in a more efficient straight line. Maybe I should try it rather than just go, rah, rah, rah. That's not
okay. See, no, James is OCD. I'm not. Okay. And I try to tell him, like, he doesn't understand, like, keeping things organized in the pantry or in the cabinet. Like, it just doesn't come naturally for me. And he doesn't take that line at all. He says, no, you're just not trying. You have to try. And I'm like, no, even when I try, it doesn't work. So it may not create conflict at your house, but it does mine. And I tell him, I remind him all the time, like, unfortunately, I haven't changed. From when we met till now, I haven't changed. And guess what? I'm not going to change. So we probably just all need to accept this and move on.
You there again, the opposite. So James,
but it
help
creates
you on
conflict,
that front.
is what I'm saying. And apparently with you and Jackie, it doesn't create conflict. I think it's because you're too nice.
Creative conflict can be good as long as let's not let the conflict get negative. Now I know James, and when he's like teasing you about that. So that's
he's not. Okay. That's okay though. I do need to be more organized at times.
Okay.
But I don't know what's going to happen. Okay. So, and I want to end on this, my fantastic life. I know I talked about taking Kimbrel to Memphis, but I had posted this on social media too. We had our county fair a couple weeks ago. And so the girls, I made them do their first demonstration. I think we have a couple pictures. I said, my theory on life, Greg, is you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be exceptional. You just need to be a little bit above average, be able to make eye contact, be able to shake someone's hand and have a conversation. If you can do that, you're going to be okay in life. Like, I'm not asking you to be a brain surgeon. I'm not asking you to be some, some actress or professional athlete. I'm not asking any of that. Just hold a conversation with someone, be able to have respect, and you will go far in life. So we started with 4-H demonstrations, and the girls were they were a little iffy at first, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And they did great. They're going to state. And I think Zach may have a couple pictures to show. So
Hey.
Kinsler, that's on the left there. That's her doing her demonstration. And then on the right, Greg, that's her winning photograph that's going to state. And I'll have to, and I'll share this. I shared it on US Farm Report. She did amazing, and so I took them out, and it was fun. For every night for a few weeks, we went out in our UTV, cruising gravel roads, and I would give him the camera, and I'm like, okay, so right now we're in the golden hour, and this is what it means, and it's the perfect light. And so maybe if I were looking at this field right here, I would try this angle, or I would try that angle, or I would try to zoom in on this flower here. Anyway, both the girls did amazing, but Kinsler got this photo of the corn, and as the sun was going down, and she handed the camera to me, and I said, Kinsler, that's what you call a money shot. Like, that is so good. And
awesome.
So she ended up getting first, and she'll be heading to the state fair. I guess the state fair kicks off next week, and so she'll be that picture will be heading to the state fair. And then Kinsler did such a good job. Then Kimbrel, there's her with her demonstration on the left. She's going to state for that too. And then both the girls did entomology with my dad. And so they each had to collect 25 insects and then go through and label all of them. And so Kimbrel and Kinsler are both going also to the fair for that. And then Kimbrel also for foods, for baking, she's going to the fair. But what I was going to tell you, Greg, is this is what I've learned from both Kinsler and Kimbrel doing insects. Okay. My dad, who's a retired ag teacher, is just on different time. Okay. He loved being an ag teacher, loved helping students. So now he's pouring that into 4-H, helping the girls and do all of that. And I love it. The time that they have together is special. But I said, it was the Friday before county fair. And I said, Dad, it was a USDA report day. I said, I'm going into the office. All I ask is that when I get home tonight, this is a Friday, insect collections are done. They've been working on this for weeks. Okay. Collecting insects. I said, that is my ask, is it's all in the box. It's all labeled. Everything is done. You guys, I'm leaving early Friday morning. I'll be back late. So that was my one ask. I walk in at 6:00 that night. And do you know how many insects they had labeled?
Well, I don't know, but I have to, in your dad's defense, being a grandpa, now I have 1 year experience. The little ones just melt your heart. So, hey, I can't. How many insects were labeled, Tyne?
12 out of 50. And the girls weren't even helping him at the time. And so I walked in and I said, this is, and he goes, Tyne, it's fine. They were getting a little tired. We've been doing this for a long time. I let him take a break. And I said, there are no breaks. We are getting this sucker done. So he came down and I noticed he was flipping through the insect book, which is what was taking so long.
You said James was OCD?
I'm not OCD. I just not patient. That's my problem.
You gave directions and they were not followed. Okay, I gotcha.
I walked in and I said, listen, we're going to work smarter, not harder. There's an app on your phone that we can pull up and we can take a picture. We can identify the insect. Then we can go to the book and double check and make sure that was right. So bottom line, Kimberly and I worked together. We got all of her 25 insects labeled and written on the little form and everything in like 30 minutes. So I got home at 6 and finally at 10:00, all of them everything was done. The girls had their boxes done. Bottom line is I'm glad it's over.
Well, one thing I would say, Tyne, I love your advice to the girls about eye contact and talking to people. That you keep on them about that, because honestly, whatever they study or go on, whatever they do, if you combine that skill, being able to look someone in the eye and listen and ask questions, I think that skill set is becoming more and more valuable by the day in this technology era we live in. People are getting disconnected. Oh. And when our two daughters were little, I'm guessing I maybe told you this story, but when you get to be an old grumpy guy like me, you get to repeat stories. So anyway.
Well, guess what? Being an old grump is a compliment in Reedland, Iowa. So we're going with that. Anyway,
there you go. So when I'm a data guy, you know that. So And we didn't have any money when our girls were little. I had 2 part-time jobs building this business. So we'd go have lunch or dinner at a little place here in Rochester. And I always wanted the girls to pay attention to the service, so who took our order and did they say, thank you, have a nice day? Or did they do the easy thing and go, here's your tray. So then when we'd sit down in our little booth and it got to the point when I didn't even have to prompt them, they'd go, that was a 7 out of 10, Dad, or that was a 9 out of 10. But I wanted them to be thinking about,
Yep.
It doesn't cost anything to smile.
Yes.
It doesn't cost anything to say, have a nice day.
Yep.
And one of our Twitter friends in ag had a great question. This was about 6 months ago, and said, what one piece of advice would you give to young people? And I said, eye contact, just like you told your girls. So that's why you're a great mom. So just keep in their ear about that. That's great stuff.
I tell them all the time, it does not cost anything to be kind. And so Kimbrel takes that literally. She gives everyone compliment. And I've told them, like, if you think someone looks nice or they smell good or, they have a nice smile, like, compliment them. People love to hear that stuff. Don't just keep it in and think it to yourself. Like, tell people.
That's and let's tie this back to the knots in the stomach we were talking about. So my family, my wife is an educator, my daughter, my father-in-law, my sister. There was a story here in Rochester. Someone came out and shared this, that they had been having knots in the stomach and thinking about a certain path. And they said the one reason they didn't, commit suicide was there was one teacher as they left school every day and walked down the hall. They didn't have this teacher for any of their classes, but the teacher at the end of the day just was part of them being them, like you're advising your daughter. They stood outside their door and they just said, hey, have a good day, Bob. Have a good day, Susie. And it was that one ray of light was enough for that person, as even with the knots and everything, to hold on to, like, you know what, tomorrow could be a better day.
Yep.
Kindness
so important. It is.
And to share those, it's easy to think it, but
that's what I tell them.
Yeah.
Yes. I tell people all the time, and the guys, whenever we're on shoots, they make fun of me because if I'm in an elevator and someone smells good, I'm like, you smell really good. I'm gonna tell them that. And
that is how you roll. I've seen you do that. Yeah,
it is. And they tell me every time, like, Tyne, that is weird. People think you're weird when you say that. I said, no. I just want them to know they smell really good, or they look really nice, or I like their shoes.
Here's the piece, Tyne, not to take it off the rails here, but this world we live in with social media and stuff, and that great advice you're giving to your girls about say something nice, that the thing I think we all have to wrestle with is, why is it as humans that people can say 10 nice things, 20, 30 nice things about, hey, you do a great job with the show or whatever, but it's the one negative comment. Someone social media says something stupid.
Yeah.
As humans, we have to do a better job about letting that not stick and just go, you know what? There's a lot of yahoos out there, and I'm not going to let someone shooting from the hip 5 beers in at 10 o'clock at night on Facebook say anything. That's not taking the smile off my face.
Yep.
It's
easier said than done sometimes, but sound advice.
Yes.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much going on. I really appreciate it. Always enlightening, always so much information. So, Greg, thank you.
Hey, always great to visit with you, Tyne, and love the podcast. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, next week, we should have Clinton back because he is back from Ireland, and I cannot wait to hear about his trip. I got a glimpse, I got a taste for what that trip was like, and it really was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. So for all of us here at Farm Journal, thank you so much for joining us for Unscripted. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us. You can dive into more of Unscripted on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and listen to it anywhere podcasts are found. I'm Clinton Griffiths.
And I'm Tyne Morgan. From all of us here at Farm Journal, keep it real as you live your life unscripted.
Unscripted is a production of Farm Journal Studios, where no one grows alone.